Then Hai replied, as Bor's sons walked among the seashore, they came across 2 logs and created people out of them. The first gave breath and life, the second consciousness and movement, the third a face, speech and hearing, and sight. They gave them clothes and names. The man was called Ask, the woman Embla, and from them were produced the mankind to whom the dwelling place under Midgard was given. After that, they made themselves a city in the middle of the world, which is known as Asgard. We call it Troy. There the gods and their descendants lived, and there took place as a result of many events and developments both on earth and aloft. In the city there is a seat called Hillotskjolf. When Odin sat in that throne, he saw over all the worlds and every man's activity and understood everything he saw. This is from Gylfaginning in the Prose Edda. So there's actually another account I want to read to you, which actually gets to the main point of this video. That this is also an account of the throne of Odin. Once again, in Gylfaginning, there's also a great place called Vloskjolf. This place is Odin's. The gods built it and roofed it with pure silver. And it is there in this hall that Hillotskjolf is the throne of that name. And when the Allfather sits on that throne, he can see over all the world. I had a thought a while ago when I was thinking about this video and the idea of the throne of Odin. What is the throne of Odin? It's a place he sits to watch over the world. And is it the throne itself that gives him that power? Or is it Odin that possesses that power? Well, in the Poetic Edda, we see in Grimnismal that even Frigg can sit on the throne and see. Now, there is one other being that I should also mention just as part of my research that does seem to have the ability to witness things around the world, and that is Heimdall. So, specifically in the Prose Edda, Heimdall is talked about as someone that is able to hear things and hear for many miles. It is never actually said that he can see everything that goes on. Here in Gylfaginning as well. He is the god's watchman and sits there at the edge of heaven to guard the bridge against mountain giants. He needs less sleep than a bird. He can see by night just as well as by day, a distance of 100 leagues. He can also hear grass growing on the earth and wool on sheep, and everything sounds louder to him. So I always had this misconception of Heimdall as someone that can see everything, but even just in that small excerpt, it seems like yes, he can see really far, he can hear really well, but ultimately he does not know the comings and goings of everything. From the Poetic and the Prose Edda, besides Frigg and Odin, the only other figure we know that sits on Hillotskjolf is Freyr. And in Gylfaginning as well, it mentions what happens to him when he sits on that throne. It happened one day that Freyr had gone to Hillotskjolf and was looking over all the world. And when he looked into the north, he saw on a certain homestead a large and beautiful building. And so this building went a woman. And when she lifted her arms and opened the door for herself, light was shed from her arms over both sky and sea, and all worlds were made bright by her. And his punishment for his great presumption in having sat on that holy seat was that he went away full of grief. And he went home and said nothing. And when he got home, he said nothing. He neither slept nor drank. No one dared to try to speak with him. Then Njord sent Freyr's servant Skirnir to check on him, and essentially went and checked on him. And then Freyr actually replied to Skirnir what had happened, that he was so full of grief that he would not live long if he did not have her, and that being Gertr. And then he actually gave up his sword to Skirnir as a reward for actually getting Gertr to agree to fall in love with him. And ultimately this led to his demise at Ragnarok when he was killed by Surt because he did not have his sword. The reason I'm sharing all of this is because Hillotskjolf seems to be one of the only things in all of Norse mythology that would allow someone to see over all the worlds, allow someone to see the events happening all around the world. And the one time that someone decides to sit on that throne besides Odin and Frigg, they go mad, they go crazy, they do not eat, they do not sleep, and then they give up their weapon that will eventually lead to their demise. So now here we are again. What came first, the mythology or the story? Perhaps this actually happened to Freyr, or perhaps this was just a lesson recorded in the stories that our ancestors told one another around a fire. And I believe that lesson in this story is that if one is to know all that is happening in the world, they will be consumed by madness. They will be consumed by lust, or pride, or prejudice, or any of these negative things that when they see the world like that. And this throne was unique. And to the ancestors telling the story, this was a magical object. To the ancestors, this was something that was unattainable, only something that Odin and Frigg could sit on without going mad. And hopefully you've actually realized what the point of this is that now, we as human beings possess the throne of Odin, Hillotskjolf, in the palm of our hands. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, is how different it is to live now in the 21st century, and how different it would have been to live 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and how we combine these ancient stories and this ancient wisdom to now. And I believe the story of Hladskiof, the story of Freyr losing his mind and going mad and possessed by love, is something that we see now. Something that we see as human beings that possess the throne of Odin in our hands. Because at any point, we can look up any country in the world, any place in the world. We can see it on a map. We can see who lives there. We can see who spends their entire life there. We can see the news there. We can see the deaths there, the lives there. How are we as humans meant to handle that? Because 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, this was magic. This was something that is so beyond comprehension to human beings back then, so much so that there's stories of the gods possessing such powers. So much so that we use these while on the toilet. We use the power of the gods, the power of knowledge and information while taking a dump. And to me, this is where the balance of our world is really clashing, is that we have these things, we have these devices, we have the internet, we have cameras, we have all these things that before in the past to our ancestors would have seemed like sacred and magic objects. Imagine going back in time and telling the ancestors what these things did. They might even say, no, only the throne of Odin can do that. And yet now here we are with it in our hands. As someone that is trying to both respect the power of the smartphone and the internet age, this also makes me really terrified by how much I think this has corrupted us. I really do think that us constantly being asked to absorb the problems of the world has done something to us. It has changed our brains a little bit because we cannot hold all that knowledge. Shoot, even Freyr couldn't hold all that knowledge. He got obsessed. I mean, you could even say that like Freyr's obsession with Gertr is, you know, connection to like Tinder or anything like that. We could draw weird conclusions like that if we want to deep dive into it, but it definitely seems like that this has changed us as humans. The internet has done a lot of really good things for us. As I've said in my digital minimalism video, there's no getting rid of it. I really don't think that we're going to see the internet leave our lives anytime soon, definitely not within the lifetime of anyone watching this video. I do think we need to realize how powerful it is and how sacred such a concept would have been to the ancestors from thousands of years ago, to go to them and say, hey, I have something in the palm of my hand that lets me see the world, experience the world through other people's eyes, and answer any question I have. That would be considered the most holy of relics, the most powerful of items to obtain. Kings would fight over it. And here we all are, with that power in the palm of our hands. I do want to take a little bit of time at the end of this video to reiterate that, of course, this is just my opinion and my theory onto this. By no means am I saying definitively that the Hladskiof is a direct interpretation of like a knowledge-wielding sacred artifact or anything like that. And this is just my interpretation of that. If you enjoyed this kind of like weird deep dive into Norse mythology and its connection with our modern world, please let me know down below and I'll continue to do videos like this. And if you can think of any topics you would like me to explore further in a future video, please let me know down below. You could say something crazy like, I believe the sacrifice of Odin's eye is our own sacrifice to society when we agree to go into debt and all these things like that. I don't know. We could draw these conclusions all day, but I really do think it's so important to look at the wisdom of our ancestors, what they learned in their lives, and see what still applies today, and even things that we may have forgotten, just like the hidden power behind the throne of the Hladskiof, and what it can mean and do to us to really absorb what's going on in the world at any given time. But folk, until our next deep dive, and until the hall, Skål.